for the Sunday comic book talk show. It's something we do every week, in case you didn't know. It happens every Sunday morning, but I guess that part is pretty clear. If you think that we are negative, we promise we are totally sincere. It's the Sunday morning comic book talk show, and here we go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sunday morning comic book talk show, which is actually happening on Sunday afternoon. And if you can't tell right away, I'm very tired. I ended up editing this week's DC Comics podcast till like 6:30 this morning. So I am not chipper, though I do have my bulletproof coffee here, and I'm raring to go. I am. But yeah, if you aren't on the Patreon, if you're on our Patreon, which is patreon.com/weirdscience, you'll already see that our podcast, it goes up early access on the Patreon, but you'll see it was 7.5 hours. This week ended up being crazy. We have a lot of books this week and a lot of guest stars, one bigger than the next, but I'm here. Sully is not here. He's actually visiting family in Florida, so he was not able to join us this week, but he'll be back eventually. I was going to reach out and grab some people, maybe have, a panel or whatnot, but this kind of ended up being a bit more impromptu, even more than usual. I almost just skipped it. I didn't even get up until 11, and then I had to go shopping, and then I went there, and everywhere. And if you end up hearing a drills in the background, maybe a jackhammer, possibly maybe a concrete truck that sounds like it's running me over, that will be my son, who continues to renovate the house and continues to have any lack of concern for when I do my show. He ended up asking at one point when I do the show, and I gave him a list of, the days and the things that I end up doing, and basically said to me, "You record all the time, so the hell with it." And he kind of ripped up the schedule, and he does what he does. But he doesn't come over and say, "Hey, are you recording?" He comes over and starts running power tools, and it drives me nuts. But here we are with everything. And in the meantime, this week of books, pretty cool. And Matt Fisher says, "Thank God you have to wake up, Jim." I'm telling you, and I don't know if anybody's ever had bulletproof coffee. It's part of a keto diet. I'm actually on a keto diet right now, and it's pretty good. It does give you a little boost. It does, but I need more than just that. I think this morning I did actually put a subject in the deal, even on the thumbnail. That's kind of the first time because, again, me and Sully kind of get together, and we did start out by reviewing Marvel books. It was weird. We were reviewing like a random Marvel book each week. That wasn't really comic book talk. That was more of let's get some things done for the Marvel podcast. In the meantime, double dip. It's what it kind of was, but I figured we're going to start doing this more with some subjects, and this was last minute, and one of the things that I've been struggling with a lot is Marvel. It's Marvel Comics, while DC actually is improving. You have a bunch of cool books, and I'm not even talking, say, absolute stuff, which is really, really the hotness. That's the hotness right now that all the kids are talking about down at the rec center. In the meantime, you do end up having some really, really good books. You have Jeremy Adams doing some killer stuff. I mean, I know that people are against Mark Waid, but that last Days of Lex Luthor ended this week really, really well. And also his Batman and Robin Year One's really good. You have Philip Kennedy Johnson, I think, doing a great job on Batman and Robin, though not many people seem to recognize that, and it doesn't seem to be selling. But also the Chris Condon Green Arrow got better this week. I had a really good time talking books this week. There are a bunch of good things going on, but as the title suggests, like what is going on with Marvel Comics? Me and my man, Matt Razor, Dr. Matt, who do the Marvel podcast, and me and Gray do some books as well, struggle to just come up with 2 books that we want to talk about. Now, the thing with our podcast, and it was kind of set up, we started as a DC Comics only kind of deal. And our mantra was we have to review every single book. Now, that did lead to 13-hour podcasts at one point. Now it's 7.5. And really, if you go back in the day stats, this week we had 7.5 hours regular podcast. We had an hour or so of a Patreon spotlight, and then we also had over an hour of absolute stuff. So it legit, this week for DC, we talked like 9.5 to 10 hours of stuff. Now, at this moment, I still haven't finished the Marvel podcast, but we have 4 books that we've talked about, and that equals about an hour and 20 minutes because it just is not going well at Marvel. And if you just think of the idea of everybody's favorite book, like, hey, what's your favorite book? I'll tell you right now, my favorite book was Spider-Boy, and that's weird. That is a real odd favorite book, but I do like it, but that's ending. And in the meantime, you end up having most people say that their favorite book is the Ultimate stuff, mainly Ultimate Spider-Man. But even that, to me, just it's kind of boring, leading towards the whole Maker event that I don't see that many people being excited about. And when you go and look at things, like what is the big Marvel book right now? Because I'm saying in the regular continuity, I know that Ultimate Spider-Man, that's the big book. But after that, in the regular continuity, if you go down the big heroes and go down the main books, you know, ASM with Joe Kelly, not starting out well, coming off of an awful 8 Deaths of Spider-Man that had him and Justina Ireland in it, coming off an even worse run with Zeb Wells. So right there is the flagship deal. Spider-Man not doing well. And then you have like these side books like Spectacular Spider-Man. That's not doing well. That book is garbage. So when you go all around, it's like everything leads back to Ultimate Spider-Man and just keeps leading back to it. Every time you talk to somebody, well, they're like, thank God we have Ultimate Spider-Man. Thank God. But one book does not a great deal make. And Yule actually is in the chat, and he said West Coast is great. And even with that, because I think it's actually better that people give it credit for Yule, but do people really know about it? But because you need those big titles, you need the big characters. And just look at the mess that, say, Captain America has had. And even though, like, traditionally, people will say, well, Iron Man never really sold or whatever, but that book is almost a book that people not only just not say, oh, I'm not going to get, like, they seem to actively avoid it and get mad about it. And then really the other big thing, the X-Men stuff. And Rob Liefeld just had on his podcast where he pretty much just came out and said it's a disaster. It's a wreck. Things are getting canceled, but they're kind of being acted as, oh, it was going to be 10 issues. And then you just end up not feeling any sort of hype for it. Nobody's talking about it. I don't think anybody's saying, oh, my God, you got to read this X-Men book. And then even in the Ultimate stuff, I like Ultimate X-Men. It's not a real X-Men book. I said it should have been Ultimate Runaways, but that's not going to sell. But again, I like Ultimate, but it's not quite an X-Men book. Then you get Ultimate Wolverine that some people have, but nobody's really talking about it. And so with the main titles, though, I guess the most consistently good book might be Ryan North's Fantastic Four, which plays a lot of one-shots. But now that's stuck in an event that I think is not very good. Is really going heavy, and it's a doom story. So you're going to play the idea and go with the idea of, you know, a political type deal, but it feels like already it's a mess. 3 issues in, and it really feels like a mess. And you start it right off the bat by showing that the tie-ins didn't really tie in, and there's a lot, and this event's going to be going on for quite some time. Yule says he likes Uncanny and Objectiveless. The others were always going to stink, and it's true. I mean, seriously, Yule is a very positive guy, and when you go into the idea, there's no way Yule would have said that NYX book was ever going to do very well, and some of those others. And Hulk is good. Hulk is pretty good. But again, I feel like when you talk about Marvel and the titles, like, say, Hulk, you end up kind of saying, it's good. The art's great when Nick Klein's on it. And then the idea, though, is it's kind of meandering. And I think it is meandering with this Charlie story to maybe get to 30. We're going to have issue 25 with Hulk versus Thor, it looks like, coming up. But yeah, it's just, even that, I don't think I have any book at Marvel that I can truly say, oh my God, you have to read this and not have something else after that. Even Ultimate Spider-Man. Hey, Ultimate Spider-Man, but it's part of this other universe and it's doing this and that. But you do get the family. But the Hulk, that Avengers is nothing. It's kind of sad. The idea of these books that I don't know what they can do or whatever. And I know that a lot of people got upset. Hey, DC's grabbing a lot of Marvel writers. But what is Marvel doing? On the flip side of that, it doesn't seem like they're doing much of anything except saying, Jed McKay, can you do more books? Can you end up doing all this? And I would say it is tough overall. Like, who is the best writer at Marvel? I think it's Jonathan Hickman, but some people don't like him. But after that, I really did like Jed McKay, but I'm kind of down on him. Philip Kenny Johnson, I wouldn't necessarily think that he's fully a Marvel writer, but he's doing Hulk, and there's a lot of weird things going down that I did see, and there was kind of a mention, I think at one point, Marvel was trying to reach out and grab, say, a Jeremy Adams. That's why you ended up having DC. It seems that that's why they made him exclusive. I actually think, or thought at one point, that they might even do that with Philip Kenny Johnson, but I'm sure they're just like, he comes in cheap or whatever. But I really like Philip Kenny Johnson, like I said, and Yule's right. Hulk is one of the better books, but you kind of have to sit there and think about stuff and go through things. And so basically, again, each week we struggle to come up with the books because, you're doing a podcast. You don't always want to talk about books you don't like. But the idea of it is there's not many to go with, and you have to review. If you're a Marvel review site or podcast or whatnot, I think you do have to review, ASM, and you do the event, and that's what we did this past week. But boy, it's not great. And I want to hear what Yule thinks of Amazing Spider-Man, because I think I kind of know he's a Joe Kelly fan, but it just feels odd. It just feels odd. It doesn't feel like anything that's going to grab somebody to say, oh my God, we're back. We're going to, here we go. And we're going to end up having some, great times or whatever. And Jay Burr says ASM have a dark future with that editor. And it's true. I mean, that's one of the things when people talk to me about, hey, who do you want to have for the next writer, when it was up in the air, when, that 8 Deaths was announced and you ended up having Joe Kelly and Justina Ireland on that event or whatever, and a lot of people were worried, saying, oh my God, it's going to be Justina Ireland. And then somebody said to me, what does it matter? Nick Lowe editing it, it's always going to end up not great. But Joe Kelly, I wouldn't think that Joe Kelly's a guy who's going to sit there and have, I know he's going to, toe the line, I guess, but he's not going to be one where he's getting stories from Nick Lowe. I don't think that Nick Lowe's like, here, you're going to write this. Joe Kelly's bigger than that. And in fact, the idea, Joe Kelly, when you go back and read some things, I ended up doing on our podcast, our DC podcast, a Wonder Woman issue that Joe Kelly had the story. The script and art was by Phil Jimenez, but the story is by Joe Kelly. It's awesome. It was one of the better issues of Wonder Woman I've read. It was really, really good. Got some awesome character work. And yeah, I don't know what's going on. And you end up where Lane says, it tells me where writing is in general for entertainment. The first movie to get me into theaters this year is one I saw in the theaters 20 years ago, Revenge of the Sith, going to see today. My son Ethan was all excited. He lives in New Jersey now, so he has that going. But he actually said if he lived kind of close, me and him would have been going to see Revenge of the Sith. Not that I thought was the greatest of movies, but I would have went and saw that in the theater. And yeah, that Wonder Woman, awesome. And the issue I'm talking about, I think it's issue 70. Think it's the one where Lois interviews Diana, where she follows Diana for the day and interviews her, mainly because she's pissed off that she thinks Wonder Woman still has feelings for Clark. And then it's so funny in that issue where it's going on where every time Wonder Woman says, she says Cal, and Wonder Woman is like, yeah, me and Cal. And every time Lois, Clark, she keeps saying it. It's so funny. But yeah, that was great. Again, I don't I hope. I don't think that Joe Kelly's lost it. I mean, he doesn't have a style at points. I mean, he does get jokey. He's like a Deadpool deal at some points. I think sometimes he does write his Spider-Man a little more Deadpool-esque, but it's still, this guy has written some good things, but boom, we go and we get Itsy Bitsy at the end of the issue. I was like, oh my goodness gracious. I actually hurt myself. I was talking on the podcast, and I love practical effects. I do. So we're talking, and I wanted to say Itsy Bitsy was a thud. And I ended up where I like pulled my chair back and I slammed my foot on the ground. I said, it's a thud like this. And I think I swear I broke my shin. I slammed down so hard. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not a young man anymore. What is happening? That's why I have to go on the keto diet now. Ay, ay, ay. Yeah, and with Wonder Woman, it is. The last great run was Greg Rucka. And even then, he ended up leaving the book because at one point after a year, he's like, what? I have to keep doing this twice a month? Screw this. And then he had problems behind the scenes, I hear, as well. But he ended up bailing. But yeah, with Marvel, though, I'd love to hear, like, does anybody have a top 5 books at Marvel right now? Now, you could even say, I don't know that I have a top 5 that I would normally say at DC right now, but I think I do because I'm starting to like more and more. And lo and behold, doing the podcast, and I had done it for 10 years with Eric, he bailed on me. But in the meantime, that son of a gun. But in the meantime, people were saying to me, oh my God, since Eric left, you got so positive. It's because the books are kind of getting better. They have some pretty good books. Jeremy Adams has a huge thing to do. But what is the deal at Marvel? And how can it get better? Because there's not really that many writers out there. And I think that it comes down to between Marvel and DC. Marvel, I mean, they do have their editors. And we kind of know the editors. I would guess that most people, if I said, who are the editors at DC, you might not know off the top of your head as much as you would know Nick Lowe and Tom Brevoort. But is that a good thing? Because, and you're a big baseball fan, stinking Dodgers. But the idea, the editor to me is a lot of times like an umpire. You don't want to notice them. At the end of the game, you don't want to be thinking about the umpire because if they did their job correct, you won't. You'll end up, but that's kind of the editors at Marvel. But DC, it seems like they're letting people run wild, but that is maybe why they're getting some of these other writers. Not that they're great, but I remember when Leah Williams ended up saying, hey, everybody who's writing at Marvel, come over to DC. They don't give a shit about anything. You could do what the hell we want here. It's almost like they're like kids, and all of a sudden they found this friend of theirs whose parents are never there, and they can go down in the basement and do things like curse. Right? See, I'm a good boy. I don't think of other things. You look around and then you say like ass, and then you giggle, right? But it kind of feels like that's the deal. And Matt Fisher says Uncanny X-Men, Incredible Hulk, ASM, and Thunderbolts. And he's like, that Thunderbolts, I don't even know what book he's talking about. Is there a tie-in to One World Under Doom? Because if that's even a tie-in, I'll go down the list. Uncanny is okay. X-Men to me is boring. Incredible Hulk is good, but it's meandering. And ASM's garbage, and Thunderbolts, I don't know. So there you go. Maybe that's the deal. And Lane says for DC, New Gods, Batman, Hush, Green Lantern, Absolute Superman, Absolute Martian Manhunter. I'll tell you right now, Lane, I cannot stand Absolute Martian Manhunter, and I feel bad. I hate it. Like, hate it more than I hate liver and onions is how much I hate it. I loathe it. I can't stand reading it. I can't stand talking about it. And in 2 issues, it already feels to me like another Mr. Miracle. And I'm not talking quality of book. I'm talking the idea that 2 issues in, people are already saying it's an all-time classic and it'll be known for a million years, and everybody who doesn't like it is a moron and all that. I'm like, what the heck? I don't like it. But we're doing an Absolute show, and I have to kind of do all those, but I think I might drop Absolute Martian Manhunter. I just can't stand it. And the idea of reading it might be a better experience than actually talking about it, because there is nothing to talk about in that book. You're like walking down the street, You see some memories. Yeah. And it says Absolute Martian Manhunter sells more than ASM last week. Impressive. But the thing is, Jaybird, we don't know that. Those numbers are nonsense. They really don't mean anything. It's only out of 3,000 plus stores. Those numbers only come from 125 stores. And even then, it really gets affected by the timing of when the books come out because it's point of sale. So we're never going to get real numbers anymore. But I do think that Absolute Martian Manhunter is selling well, but it's also because it's part of the Absolute thing. And the word of mouth is well and, good unless you hear me, because I cannot stand it. And I'm telling you right now, if that art would be different, if it would be standard house style art, and I know that that's not anything that, it's kind of a what if deal, but there'd be nothing going on in that book. I'm telling you, I cannot stand it so much. But you end up where Saul says, not sure why editors are not curating the books. It seems like the job has changed. What is the job of editor anyway? Look for problems, manage schedules, copy editing. I've heard DC say that it's even there. It's the idea of we just want to make things run smooth. I forget who it was. It was one of the DC editors that was on a podcast, and they said basically they're there to be babysitters, get things for, if somebody wants some trades, they get it. That's why I ended up, I actually, I could tell that it would be Absolute Martian Manhunter. I can sense the type of deal. I just didn't like it. I really don't like it, but I'm more for story. I'm not an art guy, and I'm not going into already a new universe where not only do I not know what's happening in the universe, I also have no idea what's going on in that book. It feels like an indie book in that universe, and I can't even see how that could combine with the rest of the books later if we do get like a Justice League to end up fighting Darkseid and things like that. And I do think that the tale of the tape will end up being, and that's where actually Lane's just saying it, the idea of the tale of the tape will be what happens in 7 to 12, because I think that the book is really geared to be a mind bender for 6 issues, and then after that it might end up being like, yeah, what do we have then? And that would impress me if it goes on and does some things. But right now I just think it's a mind bender and does feel like an indie book in the deal. Lane says Marvel likes Incredible Hulk, Ultimate Black Panther, Ultimate Spider-Man, Incredible Hulk, Moon Knight, Fist of Khonshu, my favorite series in comics right now. Actually, the last issue I read and reviewed of Moon Knight, Fist of Khonshu, and I did like it. Again, that's the deal too. When you end up where you have all these things, it is the same books kind of coming up. Now, again, there are books that people are going to like at Marvel, but in general, I just don't feel that there's any hype to it. I don't feel like anybody's like, oh my God, except for maybe the Ultimate stuff, but that kind of has died down because the books have that weird monthly schedule deal and how they go through it to lead to the Maker event, where I think everybody's event out. Everybody's got event fatigue right now. It's crazy. Even a book like Hush, like Batman with Hush 2, that's being pushed as an event because of, what it is, and Jim Lee and Jeff Loeb. But overall, I mean, I don't know, that One World Under Doom is just, holy moly, that is really tough. I did see before that Matt said Thunderbolt's best thing in One World Under Doom. I actually like the Red Hulk book a lot. I think that one is really good. And it's one of those things, I like it because it doesn't really tie in and it's kind of its own story. But I've been enjoying that one a lot. And that's about it for the tie-ins. But I'll check out the Thunderbolts deal. There's so many tie-ins that I ended up like, I don't know what to go with. And Lane said he may drop One World Under Doom. I mean, it's weird. Like, some people end up dropping it and say, I'm going to drop this event. You want to, know what's going on, and this is big. And I think a lot of people wanted to see, oh, man, Doom, this is going to be cool. But in the meantime, when you end up, and I'll ask Lane, if he drops it, are you going to pick up the trade? Because some people just say, this is a long event. Maybe I'll pick up. I don't even know that people would pick up the trade. It's kind of like, yeah, you'll said event fatigue since 95. It ends up where with Marvel now, especially with these events, when they pop up, is it weird that when at one point I completely forgot of that, Summer of Venom, and then only remembered after it was done? I'm going through the books and I'm saying, what is that? Oh, I missed it. I missed the Summer of Venom. Ay, ay, ay. But Matt says, I'll say it. Oh, Absolute Martian Manhunter is so loved because it's different than everything. That doesn't mean it's good. The rest of the Absolute line is on fire unless you're Wes. Then you don't like Superman. I like Absolute Superman. I didn't at first. I thought it was slow moving. But here's the thing. Absolute Martian Manhunter, you kind of can say, I don't know what's going on. And I don't know, the deal. And man, it's different. But number one, that's what I think 100% is Ultimate X-Men. But people just shit on that constantly. It's different. It's doing its own thing. It's wacky, but it ends up. And again, I'm not a real art guy, but I like Peach Momoko's art. So it's funny that people, want to crap on that, but then they love Absolute Martian Manhunter. And that's the thing is, I don't need something to be so different that it feels like it's not connected, but that's fine if people do like it. Also, though, remember, Absolute Superman came out and people right away said, I don't like it because I don't know what the Superman is. I don't get it. We're doing too much Krypton. And it's weird. I think that there is a wow factor to the Absolute Martian Manhunter, that it is so different, but I'm never a guy who jumps into things because of that. I need it to be a story and I need it to have something to grab me, but I end up not really getting it myself. And Yule likes Ultimate X-Men. I love it. The only thing that kills me is that we have to have a month go because there's some really cool cliffhangers that end up happening in Ultimate X-Men. And then you get to the next issue and you're like, oh, we're like 2 weeks after that. And we didn't get to see, but you're kind of doing it now in the back to tank of the mind astral plane that we end up being able to continue stuff. But I really, really do like that book a lot. And so I did say at the beginning, I started out of what my favorite book would be. And the idea for me, it was Spider-Boy for a while. That's ending. And I think it's kind of forced to the end. I think it might be Ultimate X-Men. Right now, might have been. And I did like that Sabretooth mini that just ended this week. I thought that was pretty good. And I don't know, maybe it is one of those things that Marvel, like maybe I'll just, jump in some minis. I'll be reviewing all the things, but I just end up where when we go to do the Marvel stuff, I kind of take a deep breath and go, okay, what am I going to do? Which one am I going to do? And we kind of struggle. This week, me and Gray talked the Spider-Man Predator. I think I'm Predatored out. And that book was weird. And I did see a thing, if you did read that book this week, it's setting it up to be a serial killer story. The problem is we know it's the Predator. It kind of throws it off. And then you have Predator wearing a skin suit. By the end, he's putting on faces and things like that. I'm like, yeah, all right. Oh, all right. Saul says, I wish subscriptions would allow same-day release and drive print into a token sale for those who want to collect. Don't say that with Yule here. Yule is going to flip out. Again, I do have a lot of people, though, that were waiting on the Absolute stuff at DC, and they ended up, starting Absolute Batman. And when it was coming on the app, once they started reading them, they were getting really into it. And most people now are really into Absolute Wonder Woman, which I'm with them. I think that book is great. And again, I think Kelly Thompson really does a good job of giving you some character work in that. But again, I think that when you end up having that monthly deal with the Ultimate stuff, and again, when you talk, most people do bring up Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate stuff right away. And I guess any book that sells is great, but it ends up being the Ultimate stuff, and yet the regular universe, the regular 616 is just struggling so much in my mind. But again, I'm not even talking about what little sales we see. I mean, last month it was the first time that it looked like DC took it to Marvel, but that could be something, oh my God, but it was mostly Absolute stuff. But in the meantime, it still seems like it sells enough, and they just end up going. They have a certain amount of books. They pump them out. They don't seem to have that many writers left. Everybody's bailing. So I just think that at some point they need to get something else going on. And I'll ask people, I mean, the idea of Jed MacKay was what they wanted to be their next big guy. He kind of felt like it was like, okay, well, Donny Cates, he kind of went wacko, so we'll end up going with Jed MacKay. And I think Jed MacKay's better suited for smaller books with a quirky cast of characters. I really liked his Black Cat stuff. And again, that's why I think the Fist of Khonshu stuff works a little bit better. You have 8-Ball, you got Reese, all them in there. I think it works well, but I don't think that translates into an Avengers book. I think that he kind of gets the pacing off. Everything has to be end of the world, end of the world, end of the world, and it ends up not being that great. I do think that he struggles with villains. I don't think he makes the greatest of villains in his books, but if he has those quirky characters, like a Fist of Khonshu deal, or like I said, Black Cat, it's the character work that ends up kind of shining. And there's paper floppies are killing. What could be collecting is fun, but for me, only if you like the book, read first, buy paper later. And again, if you went the manga way, manga has, day of release, but it's proven, I guess. I don't know all the stats, but people do end up buying the trades then. They end up, even if they get it free. I mean, if you want to get into manga, if you are there at the start of a series, you could read it free the whole time. And then you get the trade. The guy I do the manga stuff with, Luke Hollywood, he buys trade. If he likes something, he'll buy the Japanese trade. And then he'll buy the English trade. And then he'll buy, if they have any sort of special deal. He keeps going on and on and on. Elaine says Jim just needs a good reading slot burger so he can feel his tubby and full of the Dan Man. Yeah, I'm actually, I know that people, me included, that whole swerve with him and the Superman deal, the summer Superman special, when all of a sudden Superman just like time, it almost feels like at that point he should have, it was like, if you can picture this, you get the scene, and then all of a sudden you hear the director yell, cut, and then Superman walks, and he's on the side of the set where he sits down in his chair and then talks to the kids about the idea of global warming. And that was such an odd, weird swerve, and I can only think that he feels like a guy who would do that just to piss people off. I don't know. It just felt that way, but it also felt like, is that what he's going to do in his book coming up? We'll see, but I'm still looking forward to that book. I'll give everything a chance, and I've read some decent Dan Slott stuff. I know that, people want to make fun of his size, and also he's kind of a jerk online. But I keep saying, too, the idea of Dan Slott versus some other guys, the idea of being an old curmudgeon online and not getting along with fans, sometimes that doesn't seem as bad as some other things that people do. So I'm willing to say, okay, I can go with it. He blocked me. I always tell the story. He blocked me. I thought I was being funny. He didn't want my fun times. And he did. I say it all the time. But what he did was he had a tweet that said, the next person who says I ruined Spider-Man will get blocked. And I said, ooh, a contest. You ruined Spider-Man. What do I win? And he blocked me. And I'm like, oh, so I won not being able to see you being miserable. All right, I think that was a win. And then they changed that now, that you can go and check people out. But I don't know about everyone. I'm kind of done with Twitter, X, and everything. I'm not jumping over to Blue Sky or whatever. I'm just kind of done with social media. Somebody this week actually had a post, though, and ended up adding me, Wes, and a bunch of people, but actually asked, like, which is worse, Reddit, Twitter? And I said, well, what about YouTube? But it was Reddit and Twitter. Most people agreed it was Reddit that won the misery poll there. But I don't know. It's kind of the same. This social media stuff. And it's funny, people end up where they're like, oh my God, you got to do social media because then, you push your deal and your price. I've looked at the stats. It's like, really? Like I put up a link to a video and like 3 people clicked it, or end up with a podcast and like 1 person. So I get lazy. I don't even bother. I should be tweeting out my dirty songs is what I should be doing, but I don't even do that. And Lane said that Reddit is misery porn. Saul said that trade paperbacks are a good idea, especially if you can read the books digitally, floppies, variant cover. And again, it's one of those things it is an older model, but it's kind of set, and some people end up still loving that and relying on it. But at points, you got to come up with a way to like do the deal. I don't know. Like, younger kids, they may go digital, so you do that for them. And I don't know. You have the apps, though. And even then, I remember that Dan Didio was really upset about the idea of digital. And also, I remember at one point he was so pissed off at those, what's it called? The facsimile issues, because they were making the regular run look bad. Like, people are buying these facsimile issues more than half of our books, and it doesn't look good, and they're not going to do this, and they're not going to do that. And Dan Didio also was really concerned about a lot of things with trades. It was always with trades. You end up where Batman, Green Lantern, you couldn't change their continuity going into the New 52 because people wouldn't buy the trades then. I'm like, really? You think that, like, Killing Joke, that's going to matter? Like, people like that. But he was worried, again, because they had just done some big Green Lantern events. So they were worried about that, but not worried that everybody was just going to end up being pissed off anyway. But you have Lane say, for as much fun as I like to make fun of Dan Slott, it's not the worst writer. He can do good stories here and there. I think he gets in his own way, like Jason Aaron. I agree that Jason Aaron is a guy who really... It's Jason Aaron, definitely, the stuff that he's done at DC, it's kind of given him a spark. I hear, too, if you want to hear some gossip, some juicy gossip here, and this isn't confirmed or anything, but the guy that usually gives me some info said that, two people said that Cy Spurrier's Flash run will probably be ending soon. And maybe around September. I think a lot of books are going to renumber then anyway. And they think Jason Aaron is probably going to be on Flash, which would be kind of crazy. I don't know. It's weird, too. Like, just think of the idea and just think in your head. Jason Aaron Flash. And it doesn't really jive with me very well, that him and the Flash character. But we'll see. We'll see if that's going on. Again, not that we have to stick with just Marvel and Misery, but anybody reading I think you'll probably like Cy Spurrier Flash. That it's kind of a book that I think he would dig, but I don't see a lot of people reading that. And if you didn't know, this week started an event in that book, just an inner book event type deal. Boy, it's not great. I do not love the old Cy Spurrier. I know that people love the first part of his Hellblazer that came back and had that second part, but I just don't jive with his writing. And Jaber says a new Flash creative team, and I do think that we're going to get that. Even the sales numbers that you can't really say are definitive. So Yule says no. I know. Then who is? I usually go with Yule's Yule is very, very accepting of wacky things, and ends up being a really positive guy with a lot of comics, which he's probably saying, who, me? Mr. Positive? But it always seems, Yule, that you are like Earth 3 me, that I end up like, boy, I don't like that book. Oh, you like it? So I thought maybe you would. But yeah, that looks like that's going to be. And I do think that we're heading towards not a reboot. Which, again, people on Reddit, and they'll start yelling and screaming that it's a reboot. But I think they're going to renumber some things to take advantage of Batman being renumbered. That's why I do think that you didn't renumber Batman and Robin or Green Arrow when maybe you should have, when Chris Condon and Philip Kennedy Johnson jumped on to kind of give it, a shot. I know that some people get upset about the renumberings. So that's where you really would get mad at Marvel. And the idea, Marvel, like, really, you keep renumbering things with the same creative team, and it's so odd. It's so odd, so ridiculous, but we'll end up seeing if that's the deal. And Jaber says DC needs a new Jeff Johns, a new architect. Marvel needs more good writers. Al Ewing is writing 5 books at Marvel, and they're all kind of mid. Hopefully, Absolute Green Lantern improves in the second issue, and he's also doing the Metamorpho that is going to be finishing. So Al Ewing is even doing a couple things at DC. Again, because I think that the idea, well, first off, how many more books can he do at Marvel? And people do like him, but he doesn't seem to sell that great. I'm not a huge fan. That Metamorpho, now that's a book that I think you would like, that Metamorpho. It's just so wacky. That book is so wacky with Silver Age stuff and whatnot. But again, all of these writers going from Marvel to DC. And while I said earlier, people are upset, like, oh my God, what are we getting their cast offs, whatever. But what is Marvel getting to replace them? Everybody who leaves, it's like, a bell rings and Al Ewing gets a new book, or Jed McKay is put on something else that doesn't suit him and things. And what, going back to Jaber, I'm hoping that what they don't do, I think Jeremy Adams is great. I think that he writes things that are fun, that they're exciting. This week's Green Lantern, I loved. It ended up feeling like an event book because of the guest stars. It got real wacky and things, and I loved it. But I don't know that he's ready to architect an event. And that's what I thought about Jed MacKay. When Jed MacKay did the Blood Hunt, and I said, what you're going to do with that, in my mind, you're going to either elevate this guy to your big, or it's just going to plummet, and people are going to get a bad taste in their mouth with him, and the hype's going to be gone. I think the hype is kind of gone. So I don't want to end up having Jeremy Adams fall in that same situation. Now, again, you say the idea DC needs a new Jeff Johns. Obviously, he's at Ghost Machine, so that's not going to happen. But where are you going to get it? I know that people hate the guy, Mark Waid, and pretty good. He's pretty good, but people hate him. So it's a bad play. And Saul was Dan Didio bad. I think DC died under Jim's leave watch, even though his art is awesome. What watch? I think that he's doodling all the time somewhere. Now, Dan Didio, the thing is, it's a weird time. I talked about this the other day. The idea that you started getting word, he ended up where it was Eddie Bergenza, who should have been fired at one point for being sus. I think that's who it was, right? And he didn't do that. But also you started hearing word of that he was mean. He's always yelling. He's mean. He's this. He's that. And it hit like almost like the perfect storm, where they just thought that they needed to get rid of him, and that getting rid of him would look good, and it would somehow make look at us. We're not going to stand for this old stuff anymore. We're not going to stand for this guy who yells at people and does this. And then when they ended up firing him, they all sat there. I swear to God, if you made a crazy video, like a skit, they'd be like, "Get the hell out of here, Dan Didio, you piece of crap." And then he's like, "Okay, screw y'all," and leaves. And then everybody's like smiling. And then one person says, "What do we do now?" Uh-oh, because we don't really have any plan. I think they got rid of him and they had no plan. And the idea where if you do something really, really sus, you know what I mean? Then you got to get rid. Then there is no plan. We got to get rid. But Dan Didio was just this guy. He was a very big ambassador. And what I think that he really did was he took the heat from all the writers. Tom King does something wacky, people blame Dan Didio, and he gladly took it with a smile. He ends up where all of the stuff going down, he really was, like I say all the time, a manager of like a rock band. The rock band is the asshole, but you don't want the people to think the rock band's the asshole, so the manager takes the bullet, says, "Oh, you know what? I think this and that and this. This guy doesn't care that they got the brown M&Ms in the bowl," right? That's what Van Halen's mad about, but you don't want them to look like it is. But it ends up where he's also where when something would come out and something would go, and Marvel has the problem too, I think. It's like there's no hype man. You need Flava Flav in here, and I think that Dan Didio was kind of all that, but really he was. And remember, if you go, and Yule was back in the day, I mean like 10 years ago, but anything that would go wrong, people would yell about Dan. "Oh, that Dan Didio, that guy, oh my God, he did it again. He made, he's the one who's to blame for Heroes in Crisis. He's the one that wouldn't allow the wedding." And Tom King's just like, "I'm going to skate out of this." But then he also allowed the writers, when something big happened, they took full credit. And I think they need somebody. But kind of going with Saul, what he said too, is the idea of going and having somebody. It's funny because I was thinking about this the other day. DC needs, both companies need it, but they need an ambassador. You need somebody who is there to kind of spin everything. You could go with even the Nintendo route, where you had that one guy, that one actor who was like pretending he was like the CEO guy. I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was Kevin something. But you also need somebody within the company that is there to say, "Hey, that's not really Batman. Hey, you're writing something. Fire and Ice? Okay, cool. But how does this advance the characters? What character?" I think they need that. And I laugh because I'm an Eagles fan. And at one point, the Eagles hired Hugh Douglas, former player, to be their ambassador. And he didn't want to do it unless he could call it the Bad Asseter. is what he did. It was very odd. But I think that both companies need, and again, this is the whole thing, what's going on with Marvel, but kind of went past that to combine everything. But I think that both companies need something, but the something might be new writers that end up writing good stories and get character work. But where are they? Because I don't know that it's really that much of a sexy job for people to get into comics. And especially now, at one point, you did have that influx of a lot of writers who wanted to get the next Netflix show. And that's not really happening as much now. So they don't even have that. So you end up seeing, and that's why you ended up getting Jeremy Adams. Not that he wanted a show. I'm saying that DC was looking at other avenues. They've grabbed even podcasters, or they'll grab, actors, actresses. They end up also grabbing people that was from the animation deal. And we did get a Jeremy Adams, but in the same deal, we also got a Tim Sheridan from that. And, other things when they were grabbing young adult stuff, because that's hot. But again, that's hot, but does it translate? Because you get, some other crazy deal. But I'll go back here to look at some of the chat. How Lane did ask how am I feeling about on the symbiote series Carnage, All New Venom. I actually like that Carnage book. I think that's a pretty cool book. The idea of Eddie, and it's like it is Dexter, but I think it's a cool spin. I like that. The All New Venom. I hate to say it that I can't say I hate it because I didn't really like the lead up to the reveal of MJ. Spoiler. But that didn't really get me that excited, and I thought that book was pretty boring anyway. And then when you get Mary Jane, I guess here's the thing though, that seems very, very hyped for like, oh my God, MJ Venom. People are gonna go, yeah, even if it's hate, because it feels like Marvel really loves to get hate breeds. But the idea of MJ as Venom, I just shrug my shoulders. I think it's where some of these books, and anything Spider related, it really seems to be that Spider-Man office, anything ASM or something like that, you end up like not even getting mad anymore. You just shrug your shoulders and go, I know why they're doing this, but really why? And so, like I said, in the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, legit, Spider-Man died. We knew he'd come back, but it wasn't, he was dead. And I didn't see anybody talking about it at all. Like, you didn't have videos of people outraged or people say, oh my God, that like when we had Miss Marvel die, but that was an opposite way of getting mad and outraged. But again, there's really no real hype in anything Spider-Man, and it sucks. I did see that Dungeon Crawler Carl has joined a little earlier. Hello, Carl. And he says, what is Grant going to write? I just think it's going to be a new Arkham Asylum too. We talk about it on the podcast this week in our news segment. It was announced a couple years ago. Grant had announced that there was going to be a sequel to Arkham Asylum. And at that point, it was with Chris Burnham. It was going to end up being a, book with, I don't know that that's going to work with how stylized that was, the first one. But maybe it's something that they started. It's kind of around. But I do think that, like a Hush, I think that it's going to be some sort of thing like that. And that's the only thing I can really think of, unless, actually he said it's a Batman thing. So if he didn't say, hey, Batman, maybe it would be like an all-star Superman, but he said it's Batman. So I think it's just Arkham Asylum. And Ed said, after Identity Crisis and killing Ted Kord Blue Beetle, I celebrated Dan Didio being fired. I was wrong and would welcome him back. And that's the problem. When you get rid of somebody, again, this happens in sports a lot as well, where the coach gets fired, and then you realize we really don't have great options. You end up, and if I'm talking football, you end up, well, we'll elevate the offensive coordinator. And then you realize, oh my God, that guy doesn't have it. It feels like you're doing something because you need to. And sometimes you do need to. Sometimes, and I'll go with, I'm an Eagles fan. I've talked about it already in this show a couple of times, but I love Andy Reid. Andy Reid is a Hall of Fame coach, one of the best. But his time with the Eagles was done. It just wasn't working anymore. He ended up where he wasn't, his style just wasn't working, and they needed a change, and he left, and the Eagles struggled for a bit. Chip Kelly, and I know this record and all, but you end up with now they've won 2 Super Bowls. They've been in 3 in 8 years. Like, they really put, and even at that point, you had Howie Roseman. This is now football talk, where they even kind of were trying to push him aside, but now he looks like he could be a Hall of Fame GM as well. But then Andy Reid goes off and does great other places. This is why I think you have even like a Jason Aaron when he comes over, or Mark Waid. They get their groove back when they go and switch up. But you wonder then, like, why did we let him go? But it wasn't working at the other place. But boy, they got rid of Dan Didio and had no plan. And even somebody this week talked to me and said, what would you have thought if we had the 5G? And I really wish that we could go and see what that was all about. Because when people like grimaced and like, oh man, that they're thinking of the one thing of the 5G, which is the 5th generation, those characters, Yara Flor, like that sort of deal. But there was the other generations, and you were going to have Silver Age books. You were going to have, and they kind of ended up doing something like that with The World's Finest by Mark Waid. But when Dan Didio left, they had no idea what they were going to do. And even that, there was behind the scenes thing going about. Scott Snyder was upset because he didn't like how he was treated. He wanted to be the big guy, and he did have the metal stuff, but they still ended up with that Doomsday Clock by. Like, that thing was still going, all that nonsense. But he was mad. Everything was going on, and then they fired Dan Didio, didn't have any idea what to do, and then used pretty much, let's like scrap together some of those 5G ideas to do Future State, which didn't do much. And then I said after Death Metal, we should have had because you had those 2 months. Each book, big book, Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, Flash, Green Lantern, like have 2 issues, those 2 months, to nail down the current continuity. Because at the end of Death Metal, you ended up having the timeline open up and things change and whatnot. But instead, they kept going with starts and restarts with Infinite Frontier and now All In and Dawn of DC, all these things that they kept doing. And even with that, you even went back if you remember at the beginning of Infinite Frontier, the big thing with Joshua Williams and stuff was the idea that the multiverse was pissed off at our heroes, because they keep having crisis where everything resets, but they get the shit, and the heroes always come out scot-free. Not Mr. Miracle, but they come out smelling like roses. And that was kind of the push, which then kind of got a little bit turned into what was Absolute Power, with Amanda Waller kind of thinking that as well. But yeah, now it's turned into the DC and the deal with the New 50, or not New 52, the idea of him getting fired, Dan Didio. And you end up, Saul says, I like Mark Waid. I said it, but he appeals to folks who like a philosophical undertone, the stories. I just like that he likes all the characters. And one of the guys at DC that actually knows the characters. And that seems like a weird play to say, I only like the writers that know the characters, because they all should, but they don't. Or some of them refuse to write them in any way but the way that they're going to do it, which ends up being a wacky thing. And yes, I'm talking about Tom King. The problem with Waid is that he isn't in his prime anymore, but he still does some good stuff, says Jaber. And I agree. But I think that in the land of the one-eyed man, the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Like, there's not that many great writers anymore, and you can tell that. So, and I did see Yule said earlier, if he's still around, he mentioned Donny Cates. That's who I really want to have come back and do something. And boy, I know that he kind of screwed Marvel over with some things in that whole play, but boy, like, if he came back to do something, I'd be so fired up and all excited. Matt actually says, so is H2 12 or a 6? I thought it was 6, and then the new number 1. It is. Here's the weird thing that I heard. Now, again, I was told 2 people said this, and I'm like, man, that's weird. It looks like it's 6 issues, then Batman number 1. And then next year, you get the next 6 issues where they take a little bit of a break. I'm like, what? Like, really? Like, we're doing that? So it seems to be 12, but you're going to have like a year in between. Probably, I guess, in my mind, what they're doing is they're going to end up saying, hey, this is planned. But in the meantime, they're like, oh, man, Jim Lee, come on. Like, him doing a 12, so you got to take some time off. And then back in the deal, Comic Book Muscle says Jeremy isn't ready to architect, but neither is DC. But I agree. I think that Jeremy Adams eventually would be a guy, but he's so new to the deal. And I think that what they might be doing, and maybe they're doing it in a good way. Now, I'll use the term that nobody likes to use anymore, but I think they are grooming him to be the next big thing. They make him exclusive, and they put him on that Green Lantern Corps book where Morgan Hampton and him. I think that's like, okay, let's get him on a book where I do think that Morgan Hampton's writing most of it, but the story's Jeremy. So he tells him, and I think that gets him in a new deal that he hasn't really done. And so you get there, and then let's go. And then you end up having a crossover. Then you get a big, big event. But again, I hope that we don't get a ton of big events. And this idea that we're heading towards this event with the absolute universe combined. Why so soon? Why so serious? I don't get it. And then Matt also says, Jeff Johns is never coming back full time. They screwed him way too much. He can't come back. He's made the Ghost Machine stuff exclusive. He's making everybody else on there exclusive. So he can't just say, hey, I'm going back. And the rule is at Ghost Machine is you can finish things that you were doing, but you're exclusive then to Ghost Machine, and the people seem happy about it. I wish that they would get on the stick with some advertising or some hype, maybe even, I don't know, hiring an ambassador there to go out and, trumpet things and whatnot. Would be kind of funny. I don't know that Jeff Johns loves Dan Didio, but it'd be funny to get Dan Didio to do a book there as well. But the idea of all that is, crazy. And David says you're talking about needing a fresh voice. You do. I think both needs to do something. And you could tell the idea of, hey, we're going to do Hush 2. We all know why. They want to get that nostalgia sale. They want to end up having a big thing. But in the meantime, it did allow them to kind of go. And Matt Fraction, I know not everybody loves him, but that is a known name to go on Batman, and hopefully it does better because, boy, Chip Zdarsky, who I really like, ends up where that Batman did that Batman run. Like, since when does it seem that like a big book like Batman de-elevates your career? That used to be the thing you get on the elevator. Tom King would not be Tom King unless they put him on that Batman. That guy skyrocketed then with his Batman run, whether you liked it or not, because I didn't love it. But yeah, you end up, and I'm looking more at the deal. Lane says Grant can just do whatever he wants. I am very mixed on his stuff. Yeah, I do a Grant Morrison podcast with Gray on our Patreon, and we jump through Doom Patrol. Awesome. Animal Man, one of my favorite runs. Invisibles is a book that I never would have read if we wouldn't have done that. And I love it. But then we did a little X-Men. Didn't love that. And there's been a couple things, like we're doing the big ones that, with the deal. But boy, when he's on, he is on. But sometimes he gets a little wacky. I couldn't wrap my head around Grant Morrison stuff at one point. But the idea of going through it and actually doing a podcast this, so you get to that wacky issue or 3 in a row and you're like, oh my God, usually I'd bail then. But because we're doing the show, I end up keep going. I'm like, okay, now that makes sense. That makes sense. I'm not a patient guy. Again, go back to Martian Manhunter, absolute Martian Manhunter. I'm not a patient guy, but if it does get better, I'll be the first to admit and love that it got better for me. The idea where I can't not. I think that this is something too. Me and Yule, at one point, he did have a comment in one of the reviews I did. I'm telling you, it was like an issue 2 of something, and I was already yelling, what's going on? It wasn't this absolute Martian Manhunter. This is like a year or so ago, and I'm like, oh man, what's happening? Like, this is ridiculous. And Yule ends up where he had a comment or something like, you realize this is only the 2nd issue. I'm like, damn it, Yule, you're right. But that happened a lot with me on our podcast too. And it is a tough thing to review issues month to month, especially when you end up, some things have to take time to percolate. And though you have to have, your review and take and whatnot. But yeah, I'm going, yeah, Saul said that Didio getting like a was the plan. But yeah, I'm telling you, I'd love to see where they'd have like security cameras where they are just rooting through Dan Didio's desk and his filing cabinet. What has he got? What was he talking to you about? Oh my God, somebody pull up the emails. We have no clue of what we're doing. Barlord says, I hope Cates heads to DC. And it looks like Lane was going. He's heading to the movie. I'm sure he's already gone, but I hope he enjoys his rewatching of Revenge of the Sith. Actually, Barlord, if Donny Cates, and again, when you think about the idea of what, and I was going to do a video, what would be the next absolute books that you would want? I said you need an Aquaman, fill out the Justice League, but I'd also like a Green Arrow, and then you kind of get wacky. I think that what you should do is, I mean, not that Martian Manhunter's wacky, but at this point we have, some pretty big books. Maybe you give like 2 big ones and then 1 side one. But boy, I would love to have Donny Cates on, say, an absolute Aquaman, absolute Green Arrow, anything like that would be really cool. Especially coming back into things, kind of go with the idea where absolute you can start your own thing going. And I do think that he's a great. I really, really like Donny Cates, and he had some problems, and a lot of people dogpiled on him because of those problems, and because he's on Twitter and he dyes his hair, and then also he kind of does, engage and tries to rile people up and fights with some people and whatnot. But I really do like him, and I've talked to him DMs and stuff on Twitter, and he was really nice to me. I ended up loving his Paybacks book. I talk about it all the time. It's great. It's like a parody of the Suicide Squad, and it was awesome. I loved it so much. It was one of those books where I read it, and I'd come into it later, so I went to read, and I'm like, I couldn't get enough. And then it kind of came back at heavy metal, and then it kind of went away. But some of his characters ended up, what was it, crossover? Some of the characters from the Paybacks ended up in that. The characters were great in that. But yeah, I used to talk to him about that because I ended up reviewing the issues, and it didn't seem like anybody was paying attention to the book. And suddenly I was giving this book rave reviews. Yeah, you'll said that it is. It's really good, especially the first volume was so good. The characters are hilarious, and all the situation is just really, really funny. And Matt says Dan Didio's Ghost Machine book should be Wing Knight. The thing is, Dan Didio would do well in something that would be like a golden Silver Age type deal in that universe, and go with some things like that. Not that he's the greatest of writers, but I have like some of his stuff. I think the last thing that he did at DC was that Metal Men series. I believe it was with Shane Davis, if I'm not mistaken. I really like that, and I'm not like the biggest Metal Men fan. I really liked it, and kind of changed some things, showed like a darker side of the Metal Men, and I was like, this is pretty good. It's pretty good. But I think he did an OMAC book. Didn't love that. Like in the New 52, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't great. But that's kind of the things he likes. And one of the things that Steve Orlando said, and again, some people like Steve Orlando, some people don't. I think he's a great guy. Don't love all his writing. Don't love most of his writing, but he's a really nice guy. And at one point he told me that he used to like talk to Dan Didio about like Golden Age stuff. And he's like, it was so fun. We just talk about it like just comic nerds and have fun. That's something that I think might be missing. And I did say, and I forgive me because I don't remember who said it if I can't find it, but something that I've been saying for a while at both Marvel and DC, and some writers still get to do it, but some don't. It's the idea of, people going and saying, hey, I have a pitch for this book. Hey, and when they would say, hey, we need a new writer for Batman, who wants to pitch it, and then come in and get that idea? Because not just the story, not just the idea of, hey, I want to see what these things. It's the idea of who is enthusiastic about it. Who is the guy who says, I've had this story for years, and you have that gone. If you do pay attention to one of the bigger writers, whether you like him or not, Tom King, and David says Tom King may be a good writer of novels, but comic books may not be his medium. He did have a novel that tanked, so I don't know about that. I think that he writes in a way that, this is why I say a James Gunn likes him. I do think he writes in like a cinematic way that they kind of go with, but that could also be the artist, because he gets great artists. But if you pay attention to a lot of the interviews with Tom King when a book comes out, Supergirl or Mr. Man, it's never that he says a lot of, I had this idea. He did end up, I think that Rorschach deal, he did say that at one point, I've been, behind the scenes, we've been put this, that seemed like something he kind of got inspired to do. But the idea of Supergirl, if you look at interviews, he says, oh, DC came to me and said, can you write a badass Supergirl? Or he'll end up saying, like people had said, again, going back to Dan Didio, the idea of, oh, Heroes in Crisis. They ended up giving me the story and they told me Harley and Booster, or Wally. Like he kind of said, it wasn't really my choice of characters. He wanted to do a story that involved the mental health of heroes, but then they kind of told him what to do. But even then, that could be another podcast talking about Heroes in Crisis. I remember the moment where I thought, this is not going to be great. It was that Tom King and a bunch of them. Remember when they had, where it was one of the Comic Cons, maybe San Diego, where they had the pictures of everybody in those masks in white robes sitting around like it was an Eyes Wide Shut party? And that shit was weird. But it was like, oh my God, look at this. But in the meantime, they also, if you remember too, and you might have them, they actually sent out pins. And they said that these pins were like almost like an AA token or whatever. But if you went to the sanctuary, you'd have this pin, and you were supposed to then see throughout the DC universe these characters. Oh, look, he has a pin. Oh, he has that. He has that. And the idea of the whole play was that never happened. And yeah, and yeah, Barlord, if you mean that Heroes in Crisis wasn't bad, holy crap. That book changed like 17 times, made no sense. It was a story where at that point, there was no time travel was shut down until he decided to use it because he had no way out of what he was doing. He ended up where, again, there were clues that never, and you could tell me they were swerves or whatever. It completely changed. And at the end, had so many appeared rewrites. And by the end, he had to exposition his way out of that piece of crap book. And also, I have had more people tell me that they got out of comics because of that book than I've ever heard of any book getting people into comics. It was just the thing. And yeah, and he says, I'll give King and Minnie a try, ongoing, not so much. Yeah, I just, again, I think he's terrible. I think he's awful. If you can tell me anything that he did actual character work or the way he gets emotions is kill people. Almost every story for a while was set up by a kid dying. And it's funny because I say that and I'm like, people like the Up and Away, the Superman deal. And I ended up where I say, that is Tom King's new character, Red Herring. But yeah, Tom King seems like he's given books and he's fine. He does them. And they do end up usually are out of continuity and Black Label, all that stuff. But now he's getting back into, I think it's just because they want to have more in continuity books. One of the funny things is that Strange Adventures, and I'll get back to that Up and Away. But the idea of Strange Adventures, it was announced as an ongoing in continuity book. And then it seems like they got the first couple scripts and they're like, yep, this is now out of continuity, and changed it completely. But in that, I talk to people about Tom King and I say he kills kids all the time. It ends up happening constantly. I mean, even stuff where he had like Phantasm gets introduced in the Black Cat. He has to kill a kid. You end up in that Up and Away when I say he kills a bunch of kids at the beginning, and they're like, no. He saves the kid. I'm like, I'm not talking about that kid. I'm talking about the one that is there and got shot. And then you have Batman and Superman there, and she's like, I heard pop, 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 and then I felt my stomach get wet. Ugh, and dies. Also, that whole family got completely murdered, and then Superman goes to save the one girl. But boy, whew. And also, Tom King really loves to set things up to mean something and then goes against them the next issue as if it didn't, but it still was supposed to. Yeah. That Jokes and Riddles is when I was off of Tom King, because I actually really did like the Grayson book with him and Tim Seeley, but I didn't realize that in the background, shit was piling up. The garbage was piling, and when they ended up leaving, because Tim Seeley left to do the, Rebirth Nightwing, and Tom King went to do the Rebirth Batman, and they ended up pulling people off books earlier because they wanted them to get, because it was 2 issues a month, and they wanted them to get ahead, so you still had these series going. Lansing and Kelly came in, and boy, that book had nothing left. It was all this crazy spiral shit and auto nets, and none of it made sense. And Lansing and Kelly had no idea what to do with it. That was at the point where I said that Lansing and Kelly were like Mariano Rivera. They were always called in to end things. And then they kind of got elevated a bit, but now they're not. They had that announcement this week about, hey, it seems like we're done right now at the big, but hey, we're looking forward to doing our creator-owned stuff and things like that. And I'm like, I read it and just got sad. I was like, "Ooh, you're not convincing yourself, let alone me, that this is a good thing." It made me sad. Ay, ay, ay. Yeah, Ed says that Tom King assassinated every single character in Strange Adventures. It was a strange adventure. Boilert says that, imagine if he wrote Jason Todd's death. Jason Todd and it would be like a schoolyard of kids dead. Again, I'm telling you right now, I will tell you all that I do think that Tom King can write a book. I just don't like the way he writes it. And I think that his ideas and everything kind of goes to one play. And I do think at one point he was trying to do some things a little bit different. But when he did that, people weren't like Batman and the thing. And then all of a sudden he's like, yep, I'm just going to go and I'm going to write the same book over and over again. Yule said same issue that we issue with all the Wonder Girls. Yeah. And again, I'll go with Yule there and even go with the Wonder Woman book. First off, he comes out in an interview and says, I hate that all these Wonder Woman books never have to do with Wonder Woman. I'm going to deal with Wonder Woman. Then we kind of don't really deal that much with Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman feels like she is on Zoloft. And if you've ever been on Zoloft, which I was, you walk around like a zombie. I told the story. I was working, and this guy, I was doing this stuff, and I worked at a hydraulic hose and equipment repair type deal. This was before I went to college, and so I'm there, and this guy ends up in, you have a hose, and the big funny play is you get a little sexual innuendo when you do it, and you're like, a hose, when you're doing something like that, it's better to be a little bigger than a little smaller. So well, this guy came in, and he's like, this is too small. And I'm like, what? And I just kind of stared at him. And then he got mad at me and started yelling at me and started like threatening me. And I was like, all right, whatever. And I was like, I was a zombie. That was the day. My buddy Pete, who I work with, said, you got to get off that shit. Like, you don't even react to anything. You're like sleepwalking through everything. I'm like, yep, that's how Wonder Woman goes through and says, no, thank you. But Saul says that, Panic says, what is going on with Marvel Comics losing horribly to DC for 3 years running? The problem is, if you look at what sales are available, Marvel is killing DC. They might not have the, quality books. And at one point, though, DC was not doing great either. It was a struggle. We would review almost every book. And boy, I was getting depressed with a lot of things going, the events and the Dark Crisis on Infinite Earth. All that stuff was not great in my mind. Night Terrors. And then the Lazarus Reign. But right now, it just seems like Marvel, it feels like almost like a final statement on the Marvel Comics deal. To me, it feels like it's a machine that's running with no direction, but it has to keep running. You have to keep going. So keep on, loading the coal into the stove there, get this train a-rolling, but it's not going anywhere. It just is going down the track, and you never know where it's going. It's the train kept a-rolling. Is what's happening here, and it's just not going to anywhere. But yeah, Yule said Marvel always does win. That's the problem. And if you want to know, the biggest problem at Marvel is that they always end up selling. They always outsell. They have a ton of books. They have a ton of variants, ton of number ones, but it sells. And I think that it's starting to go a little down, but it's still not enough where they're like, oh my God. I said when I read the Joe Kelly ASM, to me it reads like a spider office that thinks nothing's wrong. There's no, we're there like, oh my God, we got to get something big because this stuff and this, it feels like they're just sitting there saying, oh, what are they talking about? And Nick Lowe is big on saying, yeah, that's just a vocal few, because you could point to the sales, which, they don't. They're not going to give us their sales numbers, but they seem to be doing okay that. And it all comes down, Tom Brevoort said at one point when somebody asked, hey, how many X-Men books are there going to be in this new X-Men deal? Please tell me there'll be less. And he said, nope, they'll be the exact same, if not more, because the being counters demand it. And that's all it is. And that's the big problem. If people end up saying, oh, Disney this or whatever, it's because a huge corporation demands that you're going to have to get things selling, and they don't care how. And these guys, so if you end up normally where you get the sales of 3 books, now you need 6. You get 6. If you have the sales of 3 books now, you need 10 to equal. You're going to get 10. They're just going to do it, and they don't care. And if they end up at issue 10 and it's canceled, they just throw out another bunch of books. Or if things start to peter out a bit, they use a new number 1 with the same creative team. They just end up, because they know that you're going to get that spike again. And will tell everybody in the meantime that usually, and if you did look at sales before, you would have that big number 1, and then things would go. I mean, there's certain books that are different. Well, I mean, the funny thing is to look at The Walking Dead as how that elevated. Like, that's one of the few books that got huge, but a TV show. But the idea, book will start 80,000, say. And then the next issue will be about 55. Then the next, and then you'll get to that level where it plateaus. It just ends up where if you start up again, you start up again. Oh my God, now this new one. But again, it is, it's not the greatest way to do it. And yeah, Japanic says, speaking of quality, again, if you say a couple of years, I might say the last year and a half, maybe, because there was a lot of bad stuff going on. Batman wasn't great for a while now. I think even Yule said it hasn't been great for a long time. You ended up having Bendis. I mean, I know that's farther back, the deal, but you had Bendis on the super books. You ended up, Philip Kennedy Johnson got on, and a lot of people liked the War World. I liked it. I didn't love it. A lot of people like it more than I did. And again, I think that sometimes some of these books get elevated in a way because everything else sucks. But I think it was good. I think Philip Kennedy Johnson is a good writer. But you ended up having the Green Lantern stuff was garbage. That Jeffrey Thorne stuff was awful. It was almost unreadable. And then you kind of have righted that with Jeremy Adams. You didn't have an Aquaman book for a while. You ended up having, the Aquaman. You have Brandon Thomas on that garbage. And I'm not even talking about whatever you care about the character, but you also had stuff where they tried to push, Jace Fox as Batman, which again, I actually liked that book more than a lot of people, but it wasn't great. And we're going to get him back in the Power Company. So there were a lot of bad books, and it's right at the I think that DC right now is at a stronger position than they have been in quite some time, maybe since the beginning of Rebirth, where everybody was in and people were all excited. And especially now you got the Superman movie coming out. You end up having some pretty cool Superman books, I think. And that's one of the books that I think it was Superman that Yule told me that I have to, not get mad at like 2 issues. And actually, I think he said, you realize this is like serial storytelling. I think it was Superman, because I was mad about Parasite wanted more, and I thought it was kind of rushed. But I'll tell you, Joshua Williamson's Superman is great. I loved it, and this issue this week was great. Even though I'm on the line, and I'll be talking tonight about the best of, and that's certainly on it. I like the idea, though. I think I'm the only one that liked and agreed that Lex should, boom, boom, boom. I don't want to spoil things, I just realized. But the idea of what Lex did in that book, I'm like, I am so fine with that. And I really, and again, not to spoil it, but people, if you've read it, the idea where I keep yelling at people, and I talked to Wes about it, I talked on our podcast about it, and I thought, what are you going to do if he didn't do that? It's a character, are you going to, I keep saying to people, you're going to have him do like work release program. You're going to do one of 2 things. You're going to make a ultimate prison for him, or you're throwing him in the Phantom Zone again. But right now, the Phantom Zone, hey, that's cruel and unusual punishment. The idea that they would have, what are you going to, you're going to put him in a bottle like you did with Doomsday? And even then, Superman was screaming at Lex, you put him in a bottle. Oh my God. Like, Superman, you don't have any plan. And Lex is taking care of it in a way that he did it so you didn't have to, because there's nothing you could do really with this character besides that. It was crazy. Ay. Yeah, Japanic said, so sad Zdarsky started Batman well after, was it? Yeah. It did get weird. You had that stop with the Night Terrors. then you end up having all these things going on, and then he had his deal. Like, number one, like, I really would like to talk to him and say, what were you thinking? Gotham War, right away, it was a ridiculous story, but you also teamed up with Teenie Howard. I mean, who's doing that? Holy moly. That story, just the idea where people think of, we had gang war in the ASM deal, and that wasn't great. But when you have the idea that Catwoman, she's going to go and train all the villains and make them good villains and do this, but they're still going to steal, and they're going to steal from the rich and all this. And she thinks, and everybody in that book, the Bat family think, yeah, Batman will go for this. Like, really? Batman's going to go for that? You really think that? Like, that's the idea of having a foundation of sand. It's never going to work past that point. You're never, and then, there's Dick Grayson. Well, she has a good point there. I'm like, get out of here. Of course, Jason Todd goes right there. Poor Jason. And again, this week with us too, Jason, I'm like, boy, Jason, you're never gonna get past anything with these writers. You need something going on, but I guess that's all he's got, because that's all they've ever given him is the idea of the crowbar and Joker, and how dare you end up doing this and that. I'll hit a little Greta there.
How dare you?
And I've been using these sound effects today. But yeah, and Japanik, thank you for jumping on. He said he wanted to jump on for some quick support and off to read Bug Wars #1 and fight for a dryer at the laundromat. Bug Wars is good. Bug Wars, Jason Aaron. Again, there's another book by Jason Aaron that I love. I haven't read the 3rd issue, and I do hear it gets very over-the-top sexy, like not in a good way, like in a Johnny Storm centipede lovemaking way. And so I'd have to see that. And Japanik says, I think Chip Zdarsky's great. I love him too. It just, I guess, a lot of these Marvel writers coming over to DC, it did give them a spark, whatever. I think that this is not mind-blowing. Certain writers write better at certain companies. The characters, the way that they're played, they're better suited for it. And I think that Zdarsky's definitely more Marvel than DC. I think that he works well in the Marvel Universe. I know that some people ended up saying his Daredevil was derivative, they say. I loved it. The stuff he did with Kingpin, I thought was incredible. I loved it so much, so I was always into that. And I was really excited when he came over to Batman, and then it just ended up, once he went in, through the multiverse for that sort of thing, I ended up losing my deal, and now you can probably hear the banging that was not as loud before. Now you can tell the whole house is coming down on me. And Jaber says Marvel is more popular, and DC needs to keep making more good books. At some point, we'll pay off. DC's worst era was 2018, 2021. Marvel's worst eras right now. The thing is, I think that it was worse probably 2015 to 16, 2014 to 2016, right before Rebirth. I mean, they did Rebirth because that New 52 going into the DCYOU, where you had Jim Gordon, Bat Bunny, Batman. Superman didn't have his powers. You were playing all this nonsense. You had Convergence. All that stuff was not good, and it really lost its way. And I think it was way worse than the 2018, 2021. And again, the 2018, 2021, a lot of that was Bendis and Heroes in Crisis in my mind, is when things started to go sour. When you have Rebirth, where everybody was so excited, it was an apology. Hey, we kind of lost our way. We made things dark. New 52, we're going to get back to the family. We're going to have all this going on. And then you end up taking the poster child of that Wally West and make him a murderer. That was like, yeah, I don't like that. That seemed like it was like, screw this Rebirth. Let's get dark again. It got so dark. But Japanik actually also says he's pumped for Captain America from Zdarsky. So am I. I was actually going to ask at one point. This kind of got all over the place, as things that I usually do. I was going to ask what people are excited about. And one of the big things for me is Captain America from Chip Zdarsky. I think that's going to be good. I wish that Chip Zdarsky would end up, and I know that, again, people seem to like Ryan North's Fantastic Four. I don't mind it because I can kind of dip my toe in and out and in and out, because it kind of does play out like 1 or 2 shot type storytelling. So I don't mind that. But boy, I'd like Chip Zdarsky on Fantastic Four. His 2-for-1 book I thought was great. And at that point, I kept being told by people that they did, that Chip Zdarsky, he's just a goof. he's a goofball. He's not good. Hey, whatever. And this is when I got excited for Marvel, and I decided I was going to do a Marvel podcast. And usually when I do certain things like that, I don't just like, oh, I'm going to do it, and I do it that week. I actually took like, I think it was like 9 months to read a bunch of things, to read what was going on. And I was really liking some Chip Zdarsky stuff right before when they changed those new number ones or whatever. But that's what I was getting ready for. And then we kicked off the podcast, and his Invaders book at the beginning of that was awesome. I loved it. I actually said on the podcast that I wanted to marry it. I liked it so much, and then it kind of got forced to an ending. But boy, it was really, really good. And yeah, Keith says, what do you think of Jason Aaron's run on Absolute Superman? And all the reviews, if you listen, I think that you'd hear, I ended up where at first it was my least favorite of the first 3. And I thought, as we like to say, there was too much Krypton. It seemed like I wanted more character. I wanted to see what the character was about. And we were just getting the little bits, and it was more a Krypton book. I'm not a real big fan. And I said, unless we find out that Krypton doesn't explode, then I don't know why we're wasting this much time. I get the idea that it was because he's older. The Kents were going to raise him, so we have to see how Jor-El and Laura ended up raising him. But lo and behold, they got to raise him the same way that the Kents did. I could guess that the idea is that Superman's being raised as kind of a good guy, but also he really wanted to push that play of how evil the Science Council was and all this stuff. AI stuff was even thrown into that, but I didn't think that it really benefited by that much on Krypton. So when we get to the deal, I like it now. Again, there's something to be said for books nowadays that actually get better, that keep getting better, and not just like, oh my God, this is awesome. These first 2, oh, now it's fizzling out. So I do like it better. It's still my least favorite of the first 3, but I love Jeff Lemire, but that Flash needs to pick it up. It feels almost like I felt like with Superman, and Martian Manhunter, Absolute Martian Manhunter is just doing what it's doing. It's wacky. And I said this week, if you end up where I think that Absolute Martian Manhunter is one of those, initially, you're going to know if you like it or not within a couple pages. And I kind of knew this wasn't for me, but I'm going to be sticking with it because we review it. I said earlier, I got so bad. I'm like, I'm not even going to review it anymore. I know that I will. I just hope that it gets a little clearer and seems like it fits in. But again, if it's this little side book that never fits in with the rest, a lot of people will like it for that. But again, it's weird because the Absolute universe itself of books kind of already is. Hey, if you don't like this, then go there. And then you get that next step with that. But I said, I think it feels a lot like the Ultimate X-Men. The Ultimate X-Men that people lost their mind. I love that. So I get it. I just don't really like it. And yeah, Lois being that badass deal. And JSA, I'm telling you, I was worried. And I love Jeff Lemire. He is probably, and I said I got mad like 2 weeks ago on the Aficionados. I was having some real bad problems that day. I was getting yelled at constantly. You couldn't imagine the shit that was going on here during that. And I was kind of like, I had to mute my mic a bunch. Then there was all this control. So when they came back, like, what's your favorite this? I think it was Superman movie or story. And I started yelling, I don't know. I don't have a favorite. Like, I got all mad because I don't think of that a lot, but Jeff Lemire is one of my favorite writers, in that JSA book, I was pumped. So when it started the first couple issues, I'm like, come on. Like, I don't want people to bail on this book. I know it's going to get good. And it started going. That last couple issues were great. I love them. So I'm like, all right, we're here. And that's what I think. Again, there are writers with everybody. That why I say Jeff Lemire is one of my favorite writers, if not my favorite, is because he's never really let me down. Even things that people think aren't great, I wasn't let down by, and I really like it. So yeah, I think The Flash is going to end up being really, really good. Jeff likes to take his time a bit. He's getting a little wacky. The Absolute Green Lantern, that's the weird thing. Absolute Green Lantern is the one with Al Ewing that I'm like kind of in a conundrum where I read the first issue. I didn't love the art and I didn't love the story, but I didn't hate it. But I felt like at the end, it felt like one of those books like, did I just read a full issue, or is this it just felt like a couple concepts. It felt like I was in a pitch meeting and you just kind of get things thrown. Like, hey, how about this? Hell's Black Hand. I'm like, all right, like what's going on? Oh, and Joe Moen, she's in, and I like Joe Moen, so none of that turns me off. I just felt like at the end where I just didn't feel like something was going in Japan. I say it all the time. I have a 3-issue deal, and again, I play the game here where I will say, "Oh man, this I'm never." I review the books, so for the most part, if something, unless it gets to the point like a Cy Spurrier Flash, where I've gone through 16 issues and haven't liked one, and get to the point where I don't even know what to talk about, then we'll drop a book. But I won't drop a book. I mean, I ended up reviewing every single issue of Power Girl by Leah Williams. I should get a some sort of medal for that, some combat pay. I don't know, but that was a slog. But again, it ended up being a book that was so funny to just point at and laugh that was the angle. But that ended up maybe the worst ending to a series that I've ever read. And the only other ones, the best ending of series, I think, and that's funny. Ross says Jeff Lemire's Animal Man was pretty bad. I loved it. I loved every bit of it. I actually, one of my last 10s, it's long ago when I was doing written reviews, was with the annual, with the Spider Queen. I guess, I don't know if she's the Spider Queen, but it was a spider who had lost a bunch of spider kids. And he ended up where Buddy and the spider kind of came and were going, because at that point Cliff had died. But I really did like Animal Man. I love Grant Morrison's Animal Man, so it's not even like I'm like, oh, I never read that, because I think that's the definitive run of Animal Man. But I did like Jeff Lemire's Animal Man. A lot of people end up telling me that they didn't like Scott Snyder's Swamp Thing. I like that enough. When Charles Soule jumped on, I liked it as well, but it felt like more of an action book at one point than a deal. But yeah, I'm looking. Riley says JSA is like if one issue of All-Star Squadron was stretched to an omnibus. It's a weird play. He ended up where, again, remember the idea, there was Jeff Johns was doing that kind of JSA book, and then you end up, that's delayed, all that stuff, and then they said that, hey, Jeff, you have to start writing JSA, and he had no idea if that was. I remember him coming out and saying, listen, I don't even know if that book's going to finish before we start, so I have to do something different. I think that he ended up having a couple issues there where he had to just go full out wacky to bring all these characters and do this thing because of that. And if you have listened to some things with Jeff Lemire, he does things way ahead. Like he says, he doesn't go for delays. And he ends up being a guy who sometimes he has series that are like, you're reading issue 2, he's working on issue 40, and it may never even get there. So he's doing that. And Doom Mega Jerome came in and saw the Infinity Watch on my recess, and let me tell you, weirdly, the book is better than West Coast and the New Champions. And he says Carnage is good. And yeah, Yule says that we could use some that. Yeah, and actually, Soul, I did like. I love this Red Lanterns in the New 52. I thought that was fun. And he says, more good Soul. It's weird. Like, a lot of times with Charles Soule, like, he ends up where, like, it's really good, or then it's boring. I think that the bad Charles Soule to me is, like, boring. And it almost feels like that's when I sit there and you're like, yeah, you can tell he's a lawyer. Like, he's going through this, like, technical, I know how to write this, but it didn't. But sometimes he goes big and is really good. And Jim Megas says big. Venom, despite the bad press, was a good read. Art was right now. That book should end right there. That, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. That whole contest and that thing, I did laugh when at one point they tried to be clever. Al Ewing's like, yeah, there really is a red herring. Oh my goodness gracious. But yeah. Charles Soule was on a bunch of things back in the New 52. Most of it was pretty decent. He had some decent stuff. I'm telling you, the Red Lantern stuff with Zillia Socks and all that going on after I think he did take over from Peter Milligan. It was really good. And it was fun. And you had like a bunch of things, and it became like a big deal with Zilius and Dexter. Like, those characters became kind of this weird, like, quirky type of deal where everybody was loving it. But yeah, he was pretty good. But yeah, since then, though, I don't know. Some of the stuff just doesn't get me. And he did have a couple big indie books, but at the point, I don't think I was really into indie stuff, and I didn't even start. But he says he'll take the L on the Venom. The whole play is I kept going like when even the first issue when Rick Jones comes in, he's got the Marvel comic shirt on. I'm like, here we go. Here you go, Al Ewing. That whole thing with rocks on and stuff. I was like, oh my goodness gracious. I can't take it. But if you do like Al Ewing and you like his wackiness of like, hey, Silver Age stuff, you should read Metamorpho, because that book is over the top. That book is only, hey, look, Silver Age was pretty wacky, right? And then you go forward. But actually, last issue I liked a little more because it does set up some things. And if you read that Terrifics book where Jeff Lemire actually, and then Gene Luen Yang, if you like that, you had a couple characters from that. People look back at that Terrifics book in that New Age of Heroes initiative, where basically it was Dan DiDio saying, hey, everybody, let's write Marvel books here at DC. But people do tend to have like a really good like soft spot for that Terrifics book. So you can do that. And and Jerome said, how got Red Hulk better than one? Red Hulk is really good. I like that book a lot. And One World Under Doom is garbage. It's garbage, as they say. And see, now Jerome shows up. I'm going to be leaving in a second here to probably go to sleep. And again, if you are interested, if you have checked out the podcast that I put up, the DC show is like over 7.5 hours this week. It's crazy. And Yul said the Terrifics people, that's the one book. I loved Silencer. I thought that book was awesome. And I believe it was Dan Abnett. And at one point, maybe it did start with John Romita Jr., but it ended up changing the artist. But I thought that book was great. I did like Sideways a little. I believe that was Dan DiDio. I kind of, the Spider-Man take, it just kind of never really got off the ground. But the Terrifics was the book that most people really look back at as saying, oh my God, that would that's a pretty good book. Now, again, it was so on the nose of being Fantastic Four, and you have that, but it was fun. It was fun, and I did like the whole play of, what was it, Metamorpho, and things in that, and so you end up having it. Yeah, Silencer was great. I think the last time we really saw Silencer really doing much of anything was on that race, that crazy race in Nightwing, where if you win the race, you get to sit on the Mobius chair and ask it anything. And it seemed, it always seemed like it was like a sus thing, like some weird Santa Claus or something. You sit down there and it'd try to grope you or something. But Silencer was in that, and I don't remember seeing her that much after that. So that was like the last thing. And it's funny because when that came out, it was a Ben Percy story. I ended up putting this up at some point. I think it was before I was even making any videos. But that race that he had was the same exact race that he ended up having with Ghost Rider and Wolverine, I believe it was at the one point, where you end up where there was a loop-de-loop, and if you look, the art was exact. It was such a weird, like, I'm going to reuse a story from the other company and did it the exact same way. And it was crazy. You have to go back and look at that. I did put up some tweets on that I don't know that they went viral, but they might have. And Keith says, I thought the Terrifics was the worst of the New Age of Superheroes books. Thing is, it got better. I ended up, because we end up reviewing all the books. So it does force me. And again, it goes back to me saying, I'm never going to read this. I always end up doing it because that's what we do. And that book got better. The first 6 issues I thought were really like, okay, we get it. It's a Fantastic Four. And it's like, oh my goodness. He says, even though it was one I was looking forward to the most, by the end, even when Gene Luen Yang came on, it was pretty cool. And Matt says, fact, Guns N' Roses only have one good album. And of course, he means the spaghetti incident is what he means there, right? Is that what you mean? And here's the thing, I agree with you. Because that Use Your Illusion 1 or 2, that actually, when people talk about the idea of grunge and grunge versus hair metal, Guns N' Roses was not hair metal. They were more rough and tumble. And, the idea when they first came out, it was like, oh my God, this is like back to Aerosmith and even like a Rolling Stones type of play, but a lot of Aerosmith, like things the way it was. And though I think that grunge was against like Axel's Attitude and Use Your Illusion 1 or 2, 1 and 2. It was crazy. But they were big hits. But Appetite for Destruction, one of the best albums of all time. So I'm going to give that a heart right there. I just liked it because I thought that was great. Yeah, I love Guns N' Roses. I will say that when Appetite, this shows my age, but when Appetite for Destruction came out, I ended up listening to it. Never thought they were going to be that big. It's, you know, you had the Welcome to the Jungle video going, and so I ended up having a girlfriend at that point, lo and behold. And so I ended up telling her that I wrote her a poem. It was basically Sweet Child of Mine. I lifted it. So I ended up doing that. And then the next summer, all of a sudden, she's like, what the hell? And I'm like, damn it, that Axl Rose stole it from me. I better sue. How did I know it's going to be the biggest song? Oh, my goodness. It was so huge. It was so huge. That was pretty good. Even though Better was one of my buddies. We had a creative writing class in high school, and we had to write like a song. The guy did this. He basically just wrote down the lyrics to what's it called? Elton John's like Your Song or whatever. And the teacher, like, he got an A. I tried to do my own thing then. I didn't get an A. I remember that was a weird class too, because you ended up where we go in and this creative writing deal, and the guy was not very creative. I realize now. But the thing is, he was like, okay, I want you guys to write songs. And this is, you know, just an assignment. But then as an example of what not to write, he ended up reading out loud I'm on Fire by Bruce Springsteen, saying that this was the worst thing ever, and that guy must be a druggie. I remember him like flipping out about Bruce Springsteen. I'm like, you think Bruce Springsteen's that bad? Like, and I'm right, we're in Philadelphia area. Like, we're right next to New Jersey. Like, Bruce Springsteen is huge. And yeah, the guy didn't like Bruce Springsteen. He thought he was a wacko. I think he even called, I'm telling you, and this is like, you know, I'm not that old. He acted like it was like some guy yelling about the Beatles. He was like, that long-haired hippie. I'm like, Bruce Springsteen? What are you talking about? The working class hero, Bruce Springsteen? Like, what are you talking about, buddy? He's got short hair and he wears a bandana and a denim jacket. What are you talking about? Yeah, the guy was real old, though. It was funny. I'm telling you, the guy might have been 80. He's like, oh, that long-haired hippie, listen to this, I'm on fire. What is he talking about? He's on drugs. Oh, it's the best. Yeah, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to write, and I'll tell everybody this is your song. I'm like, he's going to know. And I think that my friend said, how is he going to know? The guy's 80. He won't even know who Elton John is. So, yeah. So it'd be great. I'm like, well, I'm going to use a Doris Day song. I got caught. He knows Doris Day. But that is going to be the end of the show. A little Bruce Springsteen talk. I wish I had some sort of parody of a Bruce Springsteen song, but I do not. So I'm going to end up heading out. I thought I had the ending song for our regular podcast. I was going to end up playing that, but I got to play something. I could play a dirty song, but that's not the time or place here. And I did end up playing my my dirty parody Easter song last week or whatever, and I got a negative comment about it, so I better not dip into the sus song catalog. I did look, though. I think I have like 310 songs now, and I'm going nuts with these songs. So with that, I could put out a country. You could listen to a country song if you would like that. I don't know. I'm going to find something here. But thanks, everybody. And again, I'm going to be coming back tonight, I think, unless I fall asleep and never wake up. But I'll have the best of show, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to put the kind of, show marker up when you come up. Or also, I would end up doing a preview show tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Keith says, have a good one. Just discovered your channel last week or so. Oh, that's awesome. Really enjoyed the comic conversation. I'm glad. And that's cool, Keith. And thanks for jumping in. I hope that you realize that I am wacko and I end up going on tangents, but hopefully that'll be okay. I don't mind talking about comics and going off on things and whatnot. And this show's kind of still gestating. We're not really sure what it is. I did plan on having Sully on it this week, but he was going to visit family. Eventually, we may have a couple extra people on. We will be talking Creed tonight. I will be mentioning that in the best of. Pretty cool. But yeah, I'll look for a song here. I know, and I should go. Matt loves that. He loves that. He loves that song, the gray Japanese song. So I probably will. It has become the de facto deal of every show ends with that song, whether it works or not. So I'll probably go with that. We will end up doing that. I have a couple others, but we'll go with the Gray AI song. And Gray will get a kick out of it after he ends up hearing it and whatnot. But yeah, the Captain America theme would be good. And yeah, I'll be back tonight. It will not be Paradise City. If I did that, it'd be big trouble. And David said, Sus Records forever. I have to actually, one of the things is because I woke up late, David, I got to go and make a thumbnail and get a song out that the title is You Can Do Me, I won't go the whole thing. It's Do Me in the Blank, but do it slowly. Because, some things need to go slower than what they normally would. Japanic said, thanks, Jim. You've consistently had 15 to 21 listeners. That's awesome. That sounds depressing. I know. It's fine. And again, sometimes it's weird, like people don't end up finding the deal. But also I've been told over and over again that, hey, when you have a live stream like this, you shouldn't go for an hour and 45 minutes. And I just don't do it for that. I don't do it for the deal. Legit, me and David are in the know. Sus Records pays the bills. This is the bonus. The comic stuff is for fun. The Sus Records, though, that's paying the bills because it's got the skills. And Japanix, the Global Comics subscribers, Bug Wars #1 is available. It's good. I really do like Bug Wars. I think it's a really cool concept. And when you think it's going to be funny in a kid's way, it then turns to be one of the most sus books you ever had. Kind of like this. That's how I do the Sus Records. You start out, that's the thing. You don't want to get shut down. So the first verse, you have to make legit, and then you come in. After the chorus will hit them. But then you start getting, that way. And dedicated audience, these chats make our day. I miss drugs and booze, but I have comics. And look at me. I had booze at one point, never had drugs, and I haven't drank really consistently more than 4 beers in 30 years. So I only have comics. That's all I have. And dirty songs. But here we go. We'll go out because I know Matt loves the Gray AI song. It is in Japanese and is a legit song talking about Gray being a over-the-top murderous robot that's going to take over the world. If people did wonder if it was legit a song in Japanese, it is. But thank you, everybody. Thanks so much. I have so much fun talking with people because I have nobody to talk to in real life, including my family who shun me. So that is that. But thanks, everybody. And I will talk to you hopefully tonight, but if not, maybe next week.
でも私はあなたを殺します。だからそのまま受け取って